Meanwhile, in Japan...
Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe. It's been just under 2 months since The Undertaker officially retired at Survivor Series 2020, and so far, he hasn't had another match. Such restraint. Instead, Taker has been revealing more of the man behind the dead man, Mark Calloway, joining Cameo and doing media appearances such as Hot Ones, and in a surprise drop last night, appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast. I say surprise because I don't think I've listened to a Rogan episode since it moved to Spotify. Oh, and it's a juicy listen because during the interview, Calloway shot on WWE. It's tough for me because the product has changed so much and it's kinda soft. I'll probably piss a lot of people off, but they need to hear it. There's guys here and there that have an edge to them, but there's too much pretty and not enough substance. How'd that old school move work out for you, Mark? The one where you tightrope along the top rope just to slap a man's shoulder. Calloway also revealed he's now transitioned from a talent contract with WWE, which is where you're still an in-ring performer, and is now on a legend deal where he only works 2 or 3 times a year. So Saudi Arabia shows then. And he also revealed, quite shockingly, he took steroids, comparing his body to the big mother effers on the roster right now, saying, I couldn't get that way when I was on steroids, which you've got to think will severely annoy Vince McMahon. And then he said he preferred the old days where you walked into a locker room where men were men. Half of them had guns and knives in their bags. Now you walk in, there's guys playing video games and making sure they look pretty. Darn it! I sure miss all those concealed weapons in the workplace. He explained this is because the old generation of him, Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H and Shawn Michaels never mixed with the next crop of stars, where they all just worked together. Then we all just aged out. I hung in there for a long time, but we kinda aged out, and it left all these young guys to learn with more young guys, and the product changed as the young guys listen to the internet rather than veterans. What do you think about The Undertaker's comments? Tell me how it was so much better with guns and knives in the comments down below, where I'll be replying to people from out of nowhere. Undertaker isn't the only one who's been shooting on WWE either, with Nikki Cross uploading a fiery half kayfabe, half shoot promo to Twitter, where she said she's absolutely fuming at her lack of momentum heading into the Royal Rumble, a thinly veiled critique at her WWE booking since breaking up with Alexa Bliss. Even Keith Lee got in on the action, tweeting, I'm still trying to figure out why WWE continues to employ multiple fire mages. I am genuinely befuddled. Well, I can tell you actually, Keith, it's for all the backstage heat. Thank you very much. Now it's Thursday's WrestleTalk news. You know what that means. It's the AEW Dynamite review in about 4 minutes. The show opened on a really sweet segment where the Dark Order sang happy birthday to -1, Brody Lee's son, which was incredibly heartwarming. So, of course, Hangman Page took all of our warmed hearts and then broke them. Psychologically complex, self-sabotaging characters ruin everything. Luther did some classic bad guy bullying of Brody Lee Jr., saying he's going to ruin the kid's birthday, which had the great payoff of his face being shoved into the cake at the end. And then -1 told everyone, actually, his birthday was 3 days ago, you idiots, channeling his dad and throwing papers at Serpentico. The 8-man tag itself of Chaos Project and Hybrid 2 versus Page and the Dark Order was chaotic, messy, and really fun. The good guys won, with Hangman seemingly reinvigorated, being part of a team again. But he's too wounded from before. He's so scared of being hurt, being cast out, of his own self-doubt poisoning his friendships again. He'd rather not let anyone in at all. So he said, I can't, as the Dark Order had already started a celebration party. It was an incredible overall segment, going from comedy to heartwarming Brody tribute to action to then sincere heartbreak, a surprisingly emotional twist to what seemed like a done deal, which is becoming AEW's trademark. Sting said he wanted to be the first to congratulate Darby Allin on his TNT title retention in the ring. Dude, it happened 7 days ago, but they were interrupted by a great Team Taz promo challenging them to a street fight, which could potentially be a cinematic match to cover Sting's limitations. The Darby and Sting stuff isn't really grabbing me as much as everything else on the show, but Allin was a proven ratings draw in last week's main event, so he is undoubtedly connecting with a lot of other people. Cody Rhodes was all set to beat Peter Avalon in under a minute as promised, but Jade Cargill played her entrance music, which was enough to let Avalon low blow and stretch out the match a little longer. Avalon eventually tapped to protect his pretty face in a fun heel finish. FTR and Tully Blanchard cut a promo from a David Lynch film where Jungle Boy challenged Dax to a one-on-one match next week, which is now my most anticipated thing in wrestling. In his first match since losing the AEW Championship, Jon Moxley took on Monster Factory trainee Nick Comoroto. It was a surprisingly captivating story. Comoroto, a brute of a man, was the only person who would sign the contract to face Mox. He had everything to gain. Mox had everything to lose. Mox effectively put over Comoroto's strength, but choked him out in a great way to sow seeds of new talent. Mox cut a solid promo afterwards, saying all Omega's roads lead through him. Why is he talking about Cody? Eddie Kingston and Lance Archer set up a match for next week, which included an all-too-brief dream promo battle between Eddie and Jake the Snake Roberts. In one of my favourite parts of the show, Matt Hardy has done it again. I'm now on board with his latest character, and more importantly, into Private Party by proxy. Their slow heel turn through the course of this match, where they'd take Matt's rule-bending tactics and then smile when they realised they worked, made them the most interesting they've been since their Young Bucks match on the first ever episode of Dynamite. And with them challenging for the Impact Tag titles too, it makes them feel even more big money. As Nyla Rose was pulled for Rona reasons, Penelope Ford and the larger Best Friends vs. Best Man feud was incorporated into a match with Layla Hirsch. Chucky T as a butler was a funny sight, and it was sad when Miro forced him to say he was no longer Orange Cassidy's best friend, but Hirsch was the star of this segment, having a hard back and forth with Ford, only losing with a botched interference spot from Kip Sabian. Kenny Omega wasn't in action on this show, but the Super Elite saga stretched through 3 different segments. First, the Bucks went to see Omega at his home, where Michael Nakazawa cameoed as his personal assistant to find a homoerotic, topless oil painting of Kenny and Callis hung on the wall. Enter the Invisible Hand job, Don Callis, who tried to buy the Bucks out of their 12-year-long friendship with Omega so Kenny could become more focused. Matt Jackson got a shot in at Impact Wrestling, saying they used to work for that company and know the checks will bounce, so they beat up Don instead. Kenny found out about this later, seeing Don's black eye, and then the Super Elite beat up Pentagon with Omega's new boot backstage. It's a literal heel attack, setting up Kenny and the Good Brothers versus Pac, Phoenix, and their replacement tag partner, John freaking Moxley, for Beach Break. It's also the Good Brothers and the Young Bucks versus the Dark Order next week. There's so many layers there, and I'm most excited about Hangman Page. And they also announced a Women's World Championship #1 contender tournament, which will hopefully see some Impact talent get involved. But before all that, we had the epic struggle for supremacy in the Inner Circle pecking order main event. MJF and Chris Jericho versus Sammy Guevara and Jake Hager, who got a Sammy Hager cameo shout-out, versus Santana and Ortiz to decide the faction's official tag team. This was an awesome match, helped by the real drama of infighting. AEW have created such 3-dimensional characters, they can put on a 3-way tag team match entirely of heels and make it totally emotionally investing. It was Sammy and surprisingly Hager who shined the most, which made it all the more gut-punching when MJF grabbed Guevara's tights for the win. Aside from an ugly lion salt botch from Jericho, the only bad point was that Santana and Ortiz, the faction's only actual tag team have been lost in the shuffle again. What did you think of this week's Dynamite? Let me know in the comments, and follow us on Twitter at WrestleTalk_TV to vote in our poll on a poll match, where 50% of you thought this episode was good. And I agree, this was such a solid show. Even a filler episode for AEW has a ridiculous amount to enjoy. The Super Elite segments, Private Party's great character work, Hangman Page's heartbreaking character work, the sweetness of Negative One's birthday, and a fantastic blend of story and action for the main event. I've convinced myself, screw it, this is a 4 out of 4 show again. You know that whole controversy about WWE stars not being allowed to stream on third-party services? Turns out, management is hypocritical, and there's now backstage heat on Bruce Pritchard for it. Find out the whole story by clicking the video on the right. And watch last night's episode of Quizzlemania featuring Dave Bradshaw, Andy Datson, Adam Pearson, and defending champion Tempest by clicking the video below that. Subscribe to WrestleTalk for daily wrestling videos. I've been Mr. Davis. Jam that jam.